Welcome to my sewing room. So many of you, as I've traveled around the country, have said, Martha, I just want to learn how to smock. And so I thought, why not? Let's learn how to smock. First of all, what is smocking? This beautiful little dress has a print fabric, and what you see right here is called English smocking. The pretty shades of pink and green and yellow. And today, you're going to learn how to smock also. This adorable little dress is smocked on a little plaid, and it has a little bit of silk ribbon embroidery mixed in with the smocking. Let's don't forget the little boys. They like to wear smocked suits too. This little boy's suit has an adorable, very, very simple smocking right here on either side, along with the little buttons that close what we call the little button-on suit. This is another very beautiful smocked dress. It has smocking plus silk ribbon embroidery right in the middle of the smocking. Pretty shades of white and pink and yellow and blue and green. Now this little style dress is called a bishop dress. It is what we really call a round yoke dress. And this is a little blue dress smocked in shades of pink with just a little touch of green. Smocking doesn't have to be on pastel colors. It can also be on a beautiful dark fabric. This is almost a very special Christmas dress, and you can see the smocking. This time, you can't really see the smocking back here because this is what we call back smocking, and then you can see a beautiful gold lame and white smocking with beads. That's a very special and a very fancy smocked dress. Won't you come along with me? And I'm going to share with you how very easy it is to do what we call English smocking. Today I will share with you how to do 3 very easy smocking stitches. The first is the outline stitch. The second is the stem stitch. And the third is the cable stitch. The outline stitch, as you can see, has little stitches that all kind of veer to the right. Over here is how the outline stitch looks. It goes straight across the fabric, which has been pre-pleated, and right here, as you can see, each one of these stitches is taken with the thread above the needle. That's the outline stitch. The stem stitch looks very much like it, except the stitches veer to the left. Now, this stitch goes straight across also. You can see it goes straight across here, and then the thread is below the needle each time we take a stitch. Now, the cable stitch is really a very easy one also. Cable stitch has 1 stitch at the top and 1 stitch at the bottom. The cable stitch also goes all the way across the fabric, and one time the thread is above the needle and one time it's below. Now I'm going to stitch, first of all, the cable stitch for you. I have already started the cable stitch on this piece of fabric, and by the way, this is a very large piece of fabric we have done so you can see the stitching more easily. All right, the thread is below the needle. I run the needle in parallel to the stitching line, and the pleats have been put in before I actually start my smocking with a little pleating machine. I'll show you how to use that in a few weeks. Now you see the first stitch goes in. I tighten it a little bit. Now the thread is above the needle. All right, I come over here and pick up 1 pleat only. I run my needle straight across, and I'm going to tighten it that time and push the threads together a little bit. This time the thread is below the needle on the cable stitch. All right, I'll come over, pick up 1 pleat only. Now, would you notice my needle is going to go straight across with the line? All right, I've picked up 1 pleat only. I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to tighten it by pulling it up, and I'll slip it up just a little bit so it will be nice and even. This time the thread is above the needle. All right, I'll come in here once again right on that line, pull it again. This time I tighten by pulling down below. Now that is how you do a cable stitch. Okay, I'm going to come over here. Now the next stitch is going to be an outline stitch with the stitches that veer to the right. I bring my needle in on the left-hand side of the pleat. Well, I think I didn't drop my needle out. There it is. I'm going to bring it in on the left-hand side of the pleat. Now on the outline stitch, each time I take a stitch, the thread is up. I bring it in on the side of the first pleat. I move over to the second pleat, stitch through one pleat. Do you see how the thread is up? Okay, I'll tighten it, and then I'll pull my thread up again, because each time I take an outline stitch, the thread is up. All right, I come over, I take one more stitch. I'll pull it down to tighten it, but remember I have to pull it up to take another stitch. All right, I come over to the next pleat. I take another stitch. All right, I will pull it down to tighten it, and then I will pull it back up. I work right along that very line. Can you see how the little lines were run in to pleat up my fabric? All right, I stay right on top of that line. Do you remember? The thread is up for the outline stitch. I take another stitch. I will pull it down to tighten it and then pull it up to start again. All right, now one more time on the outline stitch, the thread is up. I move over only one pleat at a time. I run my needle right alongside straight along the line of gathering. I pull it down and I pull it up. All right, let's come down. The last stitch I'm going to share with you is the stem stitch. Once again, I pull the needle in on the left-hand side of the first pleat. Now the stem stitch, I put the thread down each time I stitch. I'll move over to the next pleat, run my needle exactly parallel with the gathering threads, pull it up to tighten it, but do you remember? We're going to come down now because on the stem stitch, the thread is below the needle. I'll move over to the next pleat, run my needle parallel, I pull it up to tighten it, but you remember on the stem stitch, the thread goes down, so I'll pull it down again. I'm going to move over one more pleat, take just one pleat at a time. I'm going to pull it up to tighten it, but I'm going to pull it down. Now I'm going to move over to the next pleat. Once again, on the stem stitch, the thread is down. Now then, just for fun, what I think I'm going to do is go back up to this cable stitch right up here at the top, and let's review one more time. On the cable stitch, the thread is down one time. I'm going to move over, get one pleat, pull it in. Now, do you see how my thread is coming up this time? I will leave it up for the next stitch. I'll come down, I'll make the lines, my stitching exactly on the lines. I will move in and take one pleat, and then I will pull it in to tighten it. Kind of take your needle and push it up a little bit if you'd like to. This time the thread is down, and I leave it there. I come right back exactly to that line, run my needle parallel to the stitching, and I will pull it up, and I will tighten it, and it pulls up, and I can take my needle and push it up, and my thread is up. Exactly where the thread ends on the cable stitch is exactly the way you stitch it. Now then, let me get this cable stitch from over here, and let me work on a regular sized piece of fabric. Now that is the way the cable stitch looks on a regular sized pleating. All right, I'm going to stitch down. See the thread is down now. I move over one. I take one stitch and I pull it up. The thread is up. I move over to the next pleat. I take another stitch. This time the thread is down. I move over and I take another stitch, and then you can take your needle and kind of push those stitches together a little bit. Now the thread is up this time. Take another stitch, and you see now I'm going to start going a little bit faster here and just show you how quickly the smocking actually goes when you get the hang of it and you take your little thread. It's up one time and it's down one time, and good people, that is how easy it is to do English smocking. Come along with me. We have the most adorable alphabet animal quilt for you for this series. Our quilt for this series is so precious. It's an animal applique quilt. We start with A is for apple and end up with Z is for zebra. Now there are two techniques which I would like to share with you today. First of all is how do you prepare fabrics for applique, and secondly, come over here to this house and let me tell you, turning these corners, some people find it very difficult to turn those corners, and really they're not difficult at all. But I've asked Louise Baird to come on the show today and share with you those two techniques indeed, how to prepare your fabric for applique and how to turn those corners that I think Louise does more beautifully than anybody in the whole world. Louise, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. I'm very happy to be here. First of all, whenever I do a small quilt like this, or rather a quilt with small blocks, I usually will take my blocks and cut them a little bit bigger than I need to be, because if I'm a little bit off center, then I can cut them out exactly right when I'm finished. After I cut it out, I mark my center, vertical and horizontal, of my fabrics, and then also the vertical and horizontal centers of my flower. Now the next thing that you need to think about is when you're doing a flower and you're using a fusible web, you always need to reverse the image. So this is my original. This is what I want it to look like in the beginning. So what I need to do is take my design, flip it over, and trace my design on the back, because when it's completed, it'll be right side out. Next thing, I take my design and I add a little bit of a seam allowance where it's necessary. Anytime one piece is underneath another piece, it should have a little bit of a seam allowance. Also, if there's a lot of pieces that look alike, then I'll number them so that I know where to put them when I'm finished. Okay, this is just a picture of all of the different pieces. And then I have a couple of different fusible webs. They're paper-backed fusible webs. I trace my design onto the fusible web and then fuse it onto my fabric. All of the little pieces. And I wanted to show you this green fabric. Although I wanted solid fabrics in my quilt, sometimes you can't find just the right fabric. So if you turn it over and use the wrong side as your right side that you're gonna see, it really works out real well. Okay, after I have fused all my pieces, I line up the center of my block with the center of the design and take the paper off and just start fusing everything together. And it's sort of like putting a picture puzzle together. Now when you've fused it, when you are fusing everything, you want to be sure to fuse background to foreground so that the leaves will be underneath the flowers and the flower will be underneath the center of the flower. Also, I will trace any type of inside design lines with a purple washout marker. And then the final thing that you need to do is to put stabilizer underneath your work. And this is a relatively thin tearaway stabilizer, so I've used 2 layers. And it also depends on the width of your stitch as to how many layers of stabilizer that you use. Okay, to do a corner, I've got just this big letter E here, just so that you can see these nice big corners. And I'll also do my satin stitch with a real wide width so that it's more visible. Okay, the first thing I do is start on a straight edge. I don't start at a corner or a point. I always start on a straight edge and start with a straight stitch. I hold on to my top thread lightly and take 1 stitch and pull up my bobbin thread. And the bobbin thread being pulled up and then placed underneath the foot is really just to make it a little bit neater on the wrong side. After pulling up my bobbin thread, I take several straight stitches which will tie off my thread or so that they won't come undone. And then I'm going to go to a zigzag. And like I said, I'm going to use a wide zigzag for showing today. Whenever you do go from your straight stitch to a zigzag stitch, if I just start sewing, then half of my stitch will be on the fabric and half of it will be on the base fabric. So I need to adjust by lifting my foot and repositioning it so that when I'm stitching, my stitch is almost entirely on the applique. There's just really just a little bit off of the applique onto the base fabric. Okay, now I'm going to come down to this corner. To do a mitered corner, the first thing I'm going to do is stitch until I'm off of the fabric in the very outside corner. Okay, now I'm going to lift my foot to pivot 90 degrees, and then the next thing I want to do is move my needle position over to the far right. And I know that's not real visible here, but I'm going to go down to a 0 width in a far right needle position, and then I'm going to move my fabric so that my needle goes back in the same hole that it just came out of. Okay, and then now as I stitch, I'll increase my stitch width so that it makes a nice miter. Okay, I'll do that one more time, and since I'm already in the right needle position, I don't have to worry about it changing needle positions, but I still do everything the same. Okay, again, pivot 90 degrees, go down to a 0 width, make sure the needle goes back in the same hole again, and then I increase the width as I stitch. Okay.
Well, Louise, that is absolutely beautiful, and those corners you turn are magnificent.
Thank you.
And now we have a beautiful silk ribbon segment for you. I am so pleased to have as my guest today Beverly Sheldrick. Beverly is the author of a book entitled Colonial Inspirations. She is also a guest designer for both So Beautiful and Fancy Work magazines. Beverly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Martha. It's wonderful to be here as always. Now today, Martha, I'm going to show your ladies how to do this beautiful little iris, which I've got, you can see I've used here with these shades. Here we have a completed one, the first step, the second step with this little tunnel here, and then the completed iris. So here we are. I'm going to show you. I want you to notice that this is just a fly stitch which has been tortured just a little bit. You will see I've dropped the step here and the needle here is close there, so we're just going to pull that through. We're now, you will see I've brought the thread through again, and when I put it through, then I'm going to have just a little tunnel there, like this. Then the needle is brought in over here. Now this is a mistake I find that many girls do. They don't make this bottom part big enough. So we're there, and we're going to thread it through like this, and then at another angle we will take it through. Now there's just a little tip I'd like to share with you on the stems of these. Always start at the top here. Now if you twist your ribbon like that, then make a split stitch there, and that will hold the twist in there. So when you take it through, you then do another couple of straight stitches like that. Now to make these eye shades, it's really very simple. First of all, a piece of fabric, a piece of low loft batting, which has the seam allowance taken away. You will then turn it over and you will do your embroidery. When that's finished, put the backing on like that. Now the next step is to take the little nose piece, and you will see again I've cut a small piece of low loft batting like that, turn this over, and we will stitch all that around here. Now the next step is to pin this on the wrong side like that. You want it to be so that it's not on the front here as you might expect it to be. You will see how I have put this there, and then the other side will then be pinned up along there and stitched. We're then taking this completed piece here. you will see I have stitched this on the back like that. I've turned it with the raw seam this side. You will also see that I have put the elastic there and there on each side. And then I've taken a piece of binding, I've cut it on the cross like that, folded it in half, and I am now just pinning it round like this so that it will go all the way round like so, working my way round till I get up to here, and then you will see that I have put a nick here, which just makes it easier to take that round. So once that's stitched, then this is turned over to the back like that, brought down onto the seam like that, and then I will hand stitch that all the way round. So you can see I have very quickly made this little set of eye shades. Wasn't that easy?
You know, Beverly, that is not only easy, but it's very beautiful. And I can certainly see using that on airplane trips, especially like the one where you came in from New Zealand, and when I have the privilege of traveling all over the country, because I like to take little cat naps on the airplane. Thank you so very much for a lovely and a very useful project, as well as a beautiful silk ribbon stitch.
That's a pleasure.
Now won't you come along with me to my attic, where I have an absolutely wonderful little girl's dress with embroidery and smocking to share with you. Today I have a beautiful little dress for you, which combines hand embroidery and smocking, which of course is hand embroidery also. This wonderful little neckline has feather stitch, which goes all the way around the neckline. This is so adorable. Little circles done in feather stitch and teensy little French knots also done in a circle inside the circle of feather stitching. Here's a little bit more hand embroidery, feather stitching by hand, of course, done across the side, entredot, which attaches the high yoke to the skirt, and then some sweet little white on white smocking. With some of the stitches have been torn apart, but that's okay. This dress has been around a long time. Now look at the skirt, which is absolutely magnificent. There are 7 tucks in the skirt, and then the hem, the double hem, has been put in with a hand hem stitch. This hem stitch, of course, was done by hand, but if you happen to have a wonderful, fabulous top-of-the-line sewing machine and a wing needle, you can put that hem stitch in using your sewing machine. You know, these dresses were just as beautiful in the back as they were in the front. You can see the same treatment here, the wonderful little circles of feather stitch, the entredot, and the hand smocking. It carries on right in the back, and it's just as pretty in the back as it is in the front. You know, one of the most exciting things about doing Martha's Sewing Room for you is bringing you a combination of handwork and machine work, of brand new beautiful heirlooms, and heirlooms that someone made a long time ago. Thank you so much for joining me on my sewing room today, and I would really like to invite you to come back next time.